What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and, well, when it comes down to most fighting games, especially on Nintendo, one of the most well-known games are the Super Smash Bros. Franchise. In fact, every time they're announced, everyone tends to be hyped for that title. In fact, the most recent entry, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, is one of the biggest undertakings that the franchise has ever had with the everyone is here thing. Heck, even the Fighters Pass basically allowed people to become hyped and theorize about which character would essentially end up as the next fighter in the game. And while we haven't gotten an announcement for Smash 6, it's very fair to say that we may end up getting that happening. And with that, even if that does happen, there's gonna be speculations about new fighters. So why not throw my hat into the ring? So it's time to count down on my top 10 most wanted fighters for Smash 6. The rules here: one per franchise, and it doesn't have to basically be on a Nintendo system. Just basically from a video game that could realistically have a rep on in the next Smash entry. So without further ado, let's get started. Starting off first with number 10, we have Cole McGrath from the Infamous franchise. And yeah, a lot of people would say Infamous isn't on the Nintendo system, and they're right. But since it's a PlayStation exclusive, but that doesn't mean that they could end up on the Switch, because we've seen a lot of titles that were originally not on the Switch which get a representative case with Tekken or Minecraft. That being said, and Cole McGrath is one of the more interesting characters that could make sense with the game. Also, I've seen a very distinct lack of electric fighters, with the only two being Pikachu and Pichu, for obvious reasons. And I think Cole would be a nice little bit of an interesting fighter in the series, due to being a conduit. And many of his moves could be moves from the series, from an electrical jump attack to electrical pulses, ball lightning, arc lightning, heck, even like an electrified force palm similar to Lucario's. And he has a lot of others as well, including a great physical option in the Amp, and even fire and ice powers, as seen with Infamous 2, where he got it from Nyx and Quo. Which, honestly, does kind of make some interesting sense for a more realistic character in Smash. Also, there is PlayStation All-Stars Battle, so he has some chance, or since he was in a fighting game prior. So yeah. Moving on next at number 9, we have Annette from Fire Emblem Three Houses. And yes, I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack from Smash fans due to the whole Smash Brothers has too many Fire Emblem characters. And while I do agree, I'd say most of the Fire Emblem characters are sword users. That being said, it would be nice to see some more efforts of the weapon triangle, as basically we've seen in others basically utilizing them as well, like Byleth using lances, axes, and bows as a reference to the three house leaders of Three Houses, and Robin being the first fighter from the Fire Emblem franchise using swords and magic. That being said, why not utilize a full magic unit as a fighter? And while I considered Nino from Fire Emblem Blazing Sword, I decided to go for Annette, since she's basically somewhat of a magic prodigy due to being part of the Furiad School of Magic, and considering everything else, her full moveset could mostly revolve around wind magic. While Robin's only wind spell is Elwind, Annette could mostly utilize different forms of wind magic as her only aspect of magic. Plus, she could basically also gain access to utilizing axes in her moveset, being an axe fighter, or specifically a hammer fighter, since that's a reference to her signature hero's relic of the Crusher, fitting the whole tiny girl with a huge hammer her aspect. Either way, it's kind of a nice little notice of that. And hopefully Smash fans would at least agree with me on this. Moving on next at number 8, we have Rundis from Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. Yeah, I know a lot of people are basically wondering why I'm not choosing Psylocke from considering Metroid Prime 4 is about to be released by the end of this year. And yeah, Psylocke does seem like a good character to add in, but you gotta admit, Rundis is much better. I mean, sure, we got Samus and Dark Samus, and we finally got Ridley in Ultimate. So, that being said, considering how much of a fan favorite character Rundis is, yeah, it kind of makes sense. Plus, Rundis largely uses ice abilities, so kind of makes sense how most of his ice powers would be somewhat translated into a full-on Smash moveset. And honestly, it would be kind of interesting to say the least as well. I mean, perhaps with his entrance, he could mostly end up surfing in on an ice wave. Who knows? Moving on next at number 7, we have Axel from the Kingdom Hearts franchise. Yeah, honestly, considering how Smash Ultimate saved the best for last with the reveal of Sora as a playable character, yeah, it kind of makes sense that everyone was hyped to see him showing up, especially since he was also planned to make his debut in Smash 4, only to be replaced by Bayonetta. That being said, why not bring in Axel? I mean, he's one of the few characters besides Sora to be a fan favorite, naturally due to his more bombastic personality and his somewhat relatable backstory due to being a friend of Sora's nobody, Roxas, and basically having a bit of a kind of anti-hero persona. Plus, kind of fits who basically, since we have never had a chakram fighter in the game, makes sense there. Just kind of makes sense. Plus, please, I just want for a taunt and for him to say, "Burn, baby!" Just once. Moving on next at number 6, we have Tron Bonne from Mega Man Legends. Yeah, honestly, it's the same reason as Cole McGrath, being how she's been in a fighting game before with Marvel vs. Capcom 3 Ultimate. Honestly, she has a full moveset there, that could basically be perfectly tweaked for Smash Ultimate, for the next Smash title, basically Smash 6. Plus, as much as a lot of people want characters like Zero or Sigma to be playable, in fairness, what other character would be playable than of course, Tronbon, since she's basically a sky pirate. Plus, Tronbon is more or less. Plus, considering how Mega Man Legends was one of the few games that from a franchise that had considering how Mega Man Legends was one of the few games that has not had a new entry, maybe if Tronbon ends up in Smash 6, we could get a new Mega Man Legends title. Heck, it worked for Mega Man himself. Why not Tronbon? Moving on next, at number 5, we have Chun-Li. And there's a reason why I'm considering Chun-Li here. Because, honestly, Chun-Li is basically one of the few characters who is linked with Street Fighter. And for those that already don't know, we've seen a Street Fighter character become playable in the previous Smash entries. Chun-Li, because we have Ryu in Smash 4, and we have Ken in Ultimate. So, in all fairness, it kinda makes sense for Chun-Li to become playable in Smash 6, just to complete the trio. Plus, considering how Ryu and Ken have their specific movesets that have been shown in Street Fighter, kinda makes sense for Chun-Li to basically utilize her signature kicking style in a game like Smash. Specifically moves like Hoyokusen or Spinning Bird Kick. Heck, maybe we could have Smash Brothers could have a moment like the infamous Evo moment in showing up if she ends up playable in the next Smash title. Who knows? And yeah, before a lot of people ask, I also considered Akuma for that because honestly, as much as Chun-Li is known to represent Street Fighter, seeing Akuma doing the raging demon as a final smash would really be awesome. Also, maybe if Yoshi keeps the raging demon thing, the raging demon style pose in it, Akuma could essentially show up and utilize the raging demon on him to showcase a real raging demon. That would be awesome. Alright. Part 2, coming soon.